All right, guys, welcome to episode 2 of Servo. Uh, Today we're going to talk about wiring. I made some diagrams using this really cool software, Fritzing. If you're a maker and you want to use this software for creating graphical wiring diagrams for your projects, I definitely recommend fritzing.org. They charge a little bit of money now. It looks like they want €8 or up to €25. I guess you have a choice. But it's worth it. They support makers, so if you're going to use their software, I suggest you support them. But that's what I used to make these wiring diagram for you guys, for anybody trying to build Servo. Let's see. Let's talk about some differences. My breadboard, if you guys bought my parts list, the Adafruit parts spout kit, your half-size breadboard that comes in that kit, these pins at the top of the breadboard will be level with the breadboard power bus pins will be the same. In the Fritzing software, the model half-size breadboard that they give you here, I don't know why there's 2 pins on top, so we'll kind of work around that. We'll ignore that. Some other differences: my piezo buzzer in the one that comes in the Adafruit parts spout kit is going to be a lot smaller, and it has breadboard pins. So my piezo buzzer is installed right down here, directly underneath the Pico on the breadboard, as flush as can be, and I'm using jumper wires to connect to these pins. We'll get into that, but I'm just talking about the differences as far as the diagram is concerned. Let's see, what else? Getting started, we're assuming anyone building Servo, assuming you're already a little bit familiar with your Pico. If you haven't already got breadboard header pins soldered onto your Raspberry Pi Pico, I recommend you do that. There's plenty of videos you can find that will help you out, walk you through getting that done. And also, this project, I'm going to give you as many details as I can. I want this to be really easy. It is a simple project, but I'm assuming you've probably done some of the Raspberry Pi Pico getting started workbook projects already. And what I'm talking about there is, if you go to the Raspberry Pi website, what do they have? Let's just find the Raspberry Pi Pico getting started. Yeah, they have a PDF. So if you finish the Raspberry Pi Pico getting started project book, the little booklet, you can download the PDF for free off the Raspberry Pi Foundation website. If you finish all the little beginner projects in that, this would be a great project to do after that. If you're looking for something else to keep doing, to keep making with your microcontroller, to keep practicing your MicroPython code, I believe this would be a good project for that. So let's see, what else? Yeah, let's get into it. So this is the wiring diagram. I have this in a couple layers, so we're gonna walk through it. Don't be intimidated. We're gonna start off talking about power supply, getting power to your project, and that's gonna come from these wires trailing off out of the picture frame here. This is gonna go to our SparkFun power supply board if you're powering it the same way that I'm powering mine. Maybe you're using just a battery or something else. There's options, and there's also videos on powering your Pico project. I'll kind of leave you guys to your devices on that one for now, but let's just imagine our power supply is coming on these wires to our breadboard, our left side power supply bus. And now that we have power here, we're going to talk about, no, there we go. Main power supply coming from your power supply board or your battery. And then you're going to connect these breadboard power supply bus jumper wires. We're just going to jump the power now from this breadboard power bus over to the right side power bus. All right, so power is just flowing into our breadboard here. And now finally, these power and ground wires up here connected to pin 39 and pin, what else is this? Pin 39 and pin 38 is our ground. So either, however you want to think of it, the top right corner of your Raspberry Pi Pico, pin 39 is going to be one pin down from the top, and we're just going to connect that right to the top of our power supply bus on the breadboard, right at the top, and our ground. So boom, now we have Pico coming, we have power coming to our Raspberry Pi Pico now from the breadboard. So just those three things, guys. First step, let's get power. All right, so let's get back into it. So that's our power supply coming into the board, going across the board, and then going to power our Pico. So now let's get into our first components. Let's talk about the servos. So there's two servos for our left and right arms, and our servos are going to have 3 wires each. So up here we have our left servo, and on this side we have our right servo. And you can see coming out of the servos we have 3 wires each, and this is pretty much all generic small project servos are going to be probably 3-wire servos. We have our orange or yellowish color on most servos is going to be our pulse width modulation signal, or our pulse wire. These are the wires you can see on this diagram. These are our yellow wires, 1 yellow wire coming out of each servo. These are going to be our pulse or signal wires. And each one is also going to have a power red and a black ground. So our red and black power and ground out of each servos, you could put these anywhere to their corresponding power supply bus. Like this left side one, we could have put these over here on our left side breadboard power supply bus. On mine, I have both of them going to the right side breadboard power supply bus, grounds on the ground side and powers on the positive side. And then my right arm signal wire is going to pin 22 on my Pico. This is important if you're going to follow my code, because I programmed the signal for this servo for the right arm to talk to pin 22. And that's pin 22 as numbered. If you count from the left side, you see here you have a number 1 in this top left corner, and you have 20 pins on this side. And then over here, this would be 21, pin 22. So my left side servo is talking to pin 21 or GP16. These GPIO numbers is what you're going to call out in the code. For right now, for wiring diagram purposes, we can simplify. We can just call it pin 21. You're going to see this throughout the rest of my diagram little presentation here. I'm going to use both names. So I'm referencing it twice, but it's talking about the same location. Pin 22 is GP17. Pin 21 is GP16. and we'll just keep it going like that. Now getting into the piezo buzzer, we have I already said the one that comes in the kit. The one that I'm using is much smaller, and it has breadboard pins. And I have those breadboarded pins going into the row, which would be row 21 on your breadboard, counting from top to bottom. Row 21 on the left side, if you're looking down right at the breadboard, is my power side. And on the right side would be my ground. Let's see, let's go here. So, and I have that. The power is important because I have it programmed the talking signal going to pin 20 or GP15, which would be the bottom of the Pico on the left side. So as long as your wires are connected there, no matter what kind of piezo buzzer you're using, if it fits directly under the Pico like mine does, or if maybe you just have it kind of hanging to the side and you have the jumper wires going to the right pins, it's going to work. The ground is not so important, honestly. It could have connected the ground right to breadboard power supply bus ground, but I have mine actually going to a Pico ground, which would be pin 23 on the bottom right side of the Raspberry Pi Pico. And there's multiple grounds on the Pico you could use. I'm not sure why I did that this way, but that's how I have mine, and I'm telling you guys how I have my wiring diagram set up. That's not important for programming in this instance. That's just a ground I used. If you guys want to have ground going right to breadboard ground, that's fine. That'll work. As long as the pin 21 or GP15 is somehow connected to the positive terminal of your piezo buzzer, then the programming will work, my code will work, and we'll make this Servo Man talk. Alright, so let's get into the LEDs. 5 LEDs. I know it's starting to look confusing. Don't get scared. We're going to break it down right now. So at this point, you should have cut out your Servo Man's cardboard head, design it, draw it how you guys want to draw. I went for the classic antenna on top and the kind of Princess Leia ears, even though it's a robot. But I feel like that's kind of a classic look for an old school classic robot. 2 red LEDs for the eyes, and 3 green LEDs for the mouth. So go ahead and pop those through the cardboard. Make sure they're all popped through with the long leg on the same side. I got kind of confused on this one. I feel like a couple years ago when I was doing projects like this, I felt like my LEDs were common ground type LEDs, and there's lots of different type of LEDs. I'm not going to get into that. What I got in my Adafruit Parts Pal kit were common power LEDs. That's what I'm going to refer to them as. But just make sure you poke them through the cardboard head with the long leg all on the same side so that you can keep track of which is which. It'll make it easier. What else? You could use some needle nose tweezers, or maybe just a pin, or maybe your soldering iron, something with a sharp point to maybe help you guys poke those through the cardboard. Put some super glue on the back of them. We're not really getting into the assembly right now. We're talking about the wiring, but just make sure they're all poked through with the long leg on the same side. And then, guys, I soldered my jumper wires to the legs of my LEDs. So hopefully you're comfortable soldering. Maybe I gotta remind myself to put a disclaimer on that in the beginning of the video. Some soldering is required for this project. If If you're using the jumper wires in the Adafruit Parts Pal kit, they're going to be male to male breadboard jumper wires. If you have maybe some other jumper wires handy, if you have male to female jumper wires, then you wouldn't need to solder. But I went ahead and soldered my jumper wires directly to the LEDs and then plugged the other end of the jumper wires into my breadboard and into the pins, the corresponding pins where they needed to go. So go ahead and solder them. This is where it starts to matter. Everywhere up until this point, you should have used long jumper wires for your main power supply, and pretty much you should have used the shortest jumper wires you could for your Power Plus crossover jumper wires. And the same thing, you could have used the smallest jumper wires in your kit available for your power supply to your Pico. But now, guys, we're gonna need our longest jumper wires in order to connect these LEDs all the way down to the resistors when we get to this point. So make sure you're saving those longest ones for last, for the LEDs that are really far away, primarily like this one from this lead all the way down here. You're going to need your longest jumper wire. So try to plan ahead, because we're soldering them now. You're going to need your longest jumper wires for later on. Let's try to get into this. So make sure they're poked through the same way. These are common power LEDs, so that means this long leg is where our power is going to come into the LED. So all of these power jumper wires now connected to our LEDs can just connect anywhere that makes sense for you, whatever's convenient, onto the power supply bus of your breadboard. And make sure they're all going to power. How we're going to turn these LEDs off and on when we want them to, how we're going to code them, is with a ground. We're going to code a pull down. We're basically going to create the ground as like a switch in our coding, and that will complete the circuit and make these LEDs turn on and off when we want them to. But for now, keep it simple in this step. Solder your wires and make sure every LED has a jumper wire lead connected to the positive side of your breadboard power supply bus. Just like that. Now, guys, the LEDs down here in this corner, kind of basically bottom left side of the breadboard. 5 LEDs means we're going to need 5 resistors. I'm recommending a 220 ohm resistor at least. You could use a 330 or something in between a 200 and a 300 ohm resistor. There's a little formula you could use to find out specifically what resistor you should use, but a 220 is fine. It's good enough for this application. Make sure you have 1 resistor for each LED, and the kit should give you more than enough resistors to use. If you don't know how to read the resistor color coding, you could use a multimeter, set it to resistance ohms, and measure the ohms of the resistor to see what rating that resistor is. So go ahead and find yourself 5 220 ohm resistors, and I'll tell you guys where you need to put them. Starting from the kind of top here, the top right of this little resistor stack we got going on, and descending to the bottom left, starting at the top, we want to connect that resistor to pin 11, basically in the middle of the left side of the Raspberry Pi Pico. Make sure we're on that row there, going to that pin on the breadboard. And we want to come down and connect it to column A, row 24. So this would be column A on your breadboard. I know it says J here, it's backwards, ignore that. But this would be A if you're looking at yours. And all the way down, you know this is pin 20 on your Pico, so then count down 4 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, and row A. That's where we would connect this resistor. And you're going to need to bend these out of the way. I recommend using some needle nose tweezers. Bend them, get some 90-degree angles. Make sure they're not really making contact with each other. If they do, you know, when you're using your project, it's fine. Nothing will short out. You shouldn't damage anything. The Raspberry Pi Pico has a lot of protections kind of built into it. But do your best. Try to organize it. I know this is getting like a really tight fit here. We're packing out this board. The next resistor down is going to connect to pin 14 or GPIO 10. And we're going to connect that to column A, row 25, directly underneath the last one. And the next one, let's keep going, resistor 3 would be to pin 16 or GP12. And it's going to come down and connect to column A, row 28. The fourth resistor going down is going to be to pin 17 or GP13, and we're going to bring that down to column A, row 29. The fifth and final resistor will connect to pin 19, second to last one in the bottom left corner of your Pico, and we're going to bring the other end of that down to column A, row 30. Which on the half-size breadboard that's in the kit that you guys have, that should be pretty much the last one on the board. I think row 30 is it. So if you have your resistors in place, I can go ahead and tell you guys right now that first one descending from top right to bottom left is going to be for our right eye. The next one down is going to be for our left eye. Which, if you guys mix these up a little bit, the worst that could happen is when we start programming the Pico, when we put the code into the Pico, maybe the opposite one blinks. But for the most part, it should still work. If you guys want to have it exactly correct, then do your best to make sure you got them going to the right pin. But nothing tragic should happen. And then down here, these three at the bottom are going to be the ones for the mouth. The left end of the mouth, the right end of the mouth, and the very last one on column A, row 30 is going to be for the mouth center. Out of all of these, that last one is probably the most important because we're going to program GP14, pin 19, to do the talking. We're going to coordinate the buzzing of the piezo buzzer with GP14 to animate the talking on our Servo Man project. So take your time, guys. Don't get frustrated. I know there's really teeny tiny parts. Definitely those, like some type of needle nose long tweezers will help. And then we'll keep going on to the next step. So here it is. We're at the end. I hope you saved your longest wires. You can refer to this little chart at the bottom so you know where they go. You can solder the ground leads, the ground jumper wire leads to your LEDs, and then connect them to their corresponding resistor locations on the breadboard. Make sure they're on the same row with their resistor, and make sure nothing else is connected to that row. And then you guys could pretty much copy and paste my code if you wanted to, and everything should work. As long as we did everything right, everything should work now. All of these are going to be posted on my Ko-fi. I'll post all these little, I save these as PNGs, so you can be able to download them there or look them up on my Ko-fi and refer to this if you want to. I hope that was helpful, guys. I hope you're able to follow along, and I hope you enjoy building your Servo Man project.